Hello, YouTube. I still haven't bothered to look up the name of that word that I want to do the video on. Even though I know in my head the definition of that word, I don't know what the actual word is. As I said before in my topics video, I kind of thought of the idea independently and didn't know there was a word for it until much later when I looked it up, and I had already been, believing and living by this idea. So, since I don't know the word, I'm going to look it up when I actually upload this video and make the title of the video the word, so it'll look kind of like I knew what I was talking about all along, since the title is the first part you see of the video. But of course, I won't actually say it anywhere in the video, and in fact, if I feel the need to say it, I might just say something weird like the title of this video. So, yes, it will remain a mystery to me until I go and upload it, but you already know because it's sitting above my head. Okay, so what does this word mean? It essentially means that any action can be described as good or evil based on the amount of happiness it brings. Now, I'm not saying that you should always do things that make you happy, because that's not part of the definition. Your happiness is no more or less important than anyone else's happiness. And really the proof for this is in, what everyone's goal for doing anything, anywhere in the world, no matter what, what it may seem like their goal is, their, eventual goal is their personal happiness. Okay, this is what drives every person, every living creature that has any amount of intelligence at all, is doing things for their own happiness. And, let me give you a few examples that people might not see at first. Some people might see, for instance, monks who are doing all these things of self-sacrifice. They are, being purposefully uncomfortable. And the reason that they're doing that is because they believe that when this life is over, they're going to go to a place where there is eternal happiness. So, in the end, and they believe that, some unhappiness in this lifetime is, worth the eventual reward of eternal happiness. So, in the end, they're driven by happiness as well. Let's see. Even if it isn't necessarily a goal of happiness, it's a goal of lack of unhappiness, which really, if you look at happiness on a scale of from all the way as happy as you can be to all the way down as unhappy as you can be, it's still an attempt to raise yourself higher on that scale. For instance, going to work. Why do you go to work? Well, you do it for money. Why do you want the money? Because the money can get you things, in some cases, as, basic as food. Food isn't necessarily something that makes us happy, though quite often it does, but it definitely prevents us from being unhappy, because if we don't have food, then we are very unhappy, and we become more and more unhappy until we completely stop existing, at which point there's no happiness. So, even on the most basic levels, food is attempting to prevent unhappiness or bring happiness, depending on how you look at it. And then, next, let's see. So, even if, hang on for a second. Okay, I'm back. There was someone passing by the car, I wasn't sure. Anyway, if we cannot, I don't know where I was going with that sentence, but, On the other hand, sometimes working, even if, you go to work and the work itself makes you unhappy, the goal is that money. And even if it isn't for survival, then it's even more, you're attempting to get desires which make you happy. We would not go to work if it made us unhappy and there was no, reward of future happiness involved. That's really the difference between, a rational person and an irrational person, is the ability to see future happiness and to gauge your current amount of happiness in order to, fulfill that. The ability to say, okay, work sucks, I don't like going, but I'm gonna go anyway because it will give me money, and the money will make me happy, and the happiness, or rather, the money will indirectly. Having money in and of itself doesn't usually make people happy, but the things that they can spend that money on do make them happy. And so a rational person is able to gauge and say, okay, well, this work does make me unhappy, but it outweighs the unhappiness that I would feel if I wasn't working. So, and I didn't get the money, and I didn't eventually spend that money on things to make me happy, or in the case of things like food and shelter, prevent me from being unhappy. So as you can see, pretty much, all of our goals, whether they're short-term or long-term, revolve around our personal happiness. Now, happiness, you don't think of it as nearly as important as you should, because when you think about it that way, that means that absolutely everything, that every intelligent creature, whether it's a dog eating its food, a wolf hunting, any of those creatures are doing things for their personal happiness. Happiness is the goal of every creature in the world. So you really have to look at it as this big deal. And, therefore, something can be categorized as more good or evil if it creates more overall happiness. For instance, the Holocaust. Everyone views that as a very evil event. They view Hitler as a very evil person. And the key there is that, yes, it did bring certain people happiness. It brought, Hitler happiness, otherwise he wouldn't have done it. But it brought a great number more people a greater amount of unhappiness. Obviously, these people were being tortured and killed systematically. Terrible, terrible event. And it can be easily shown how, much more unhappiness it brought than happiness, even though there were some of each in the equation. And that's really how most things are. And, if you make it your goal in life, and this is what this word means, is, the idea that everything can be gauged according to how much happiness and unhappiness it brings. And an evil person will tend to think of their own happiness and not think of the happiness of any other people. Or if they do think of other people, they think of a select group of other people or other creatures even. And this was one part of the definition that, kind of eluded me for a while, but eventually it was Katie who kind of pointed out in a journal entry that, from this view, you could also look at the happiness and unhappiness of animals. And, if a particular act brings about more or less unhappiness, then, it doesn't matter if it's the happiness of a human, of an animal. And an evil person is usually the type who distinguishes between whose happiness they count as part of this equation. There's a certain type of evil person who is simply in it for themselves. They will, just decide, okay, my happiness is the only one that counts, and I'm going to do things that make me happy, even if it involves, causing great unhappiness to other people. These are the serial killers, the, rapists, the people who are just doing things for themselves. Then there are the people who consider, a certain group of individuals as counting toward this, but ignore another group of individuals. And the more people they ignore, or, the more unhappiness they cause upon that group of people they ignore, the more evil they could be said to be. For instance, okay, one person says only, me and my family count, anyone else, and I don't care. And, that person is fairly evil, because they will do things like, lie and steal just for their family. And completely, some of the people at Enron, if you want to look at it that way, looked at just them, their family, obviously their descendants in the future are going to benefit, but they didn't look at their employees. They said, screw all them out of the money, I just want me and my family to have the money. And that is a very large manner of evil. Then there are people who mistreat animals, and, they're not Hitler, but they are still people who have decided, okay, human beings, and human beings are animals, by the way, human beings count, but anything that is not a human being doesn't count. And that's evil. That is a terrible way to look at the world, because it's very obvious that animals have feelings too. Anyone who's spent more than a half hour with a dog and, has attempted to get to know that dog in any way will realize that that dog can feel happiness, it can feel pain, it can feel pleasure. It is as much a living thing as we are. It doesn't matter that it isn't quite as intelligent, although, down to a certain degree of intelligence, it is arguable that it doesn't feel happiness anymore. Like ants, for instance, that's a very debatable subject. Do ants actually have the mental capacity for happiness, or are they really just automatons? I don't have the answer to that, but at least, on a level of mammals, we can fairly easily prove that these things do feel the same range of emotions that we do. And, therefore they have no more or less right to be happy than we do. And anything that takes away that right from them, anything that causes unhappiness to an animal, in order to gain more happiness for you, is an evil act. So, this is my summary of whatever the word above me is, and my feelings on it. And, it's a conclusion I came to, like I said, a long time before I figured out there was a word for it. And it's one of those things, as I've said with a lot of my beliefs, if I ever find a flaw in it, if I ever find something that, contradicts it, some instance where causing a greater amount of happiness cannot be viewed as a good action, then I'll revoke it and find some other way to look at things. That's how I do things. That's how I manage my beliefs. But as of yet, I haven't been able to find any situation where, the most good act doesn't cause the most happiness. And the real moral dilemma of it is always determining, because it's impossible for us to see into the future, and the reason we have moral dilemmas and moral debates is because it's not always obvious what's going to bring the most happiness. There's always these theoretical things of, if you could lie to someone and make that person happier, and you could be guaranteed that that person would never find out about that lie or never have any negative benefits from it, would you lie to them? And the answer should be yes. Perhaps it's making a sacrifice on your part, perhaps it's, degrading your personal integrity a little bit, but if there was a way to ensure that they would never find out, it would never have a negative effect on them, then yes, that is a lie that should be told. But there's no such thing. There's never a situation in which a lie is ever going to be impossible for them to find out. And, you know, it's going to bring them, it has at least a chance, and it might be a higher or lower percent chance, of causing them unhappiness sometime in the future when they find out that you lied to them. And, you know, sometimes there comes a situation where you have to weigh, you know, the possible loss and gain of this decision, you know, and the probable consequences of your actions. And, you know, in some cases, you just have to kind of guess and say, okay, I think this has the highest chance of creating the most happiness, but you can never be sure. And that's part of the whole information is power thing, I guess, is, you know, the more information you can gather about a particular situation, the more you can determine, the easier you can determine whether or not that situation is going to bring about the most happiness. So, anyway, I think I've made my point. I think I've, you know, displayed my beliefs as well as I can, and, you know, shown you why I believe them. Hey, look, I am going at good speed because the state trooper just passed me. So, apparently I'm not going to get pulled over for speeding, which is good news. I guess I'll wrap this video up. If I have something else to say, I'll probably say it in a different video. That's it for this one. Have a great day, everyone, and make sure to, you know, give some of these thoughts, these ideas some thoughts. If you've watched this far, then hopefully you already are. Bye.